Hey guys, welcome to the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best practices all over. And today, boy, do I have a treat for you. I've got one of my great friends, Xana Winans from Golden Proportions, she not only started the company and helps dentists all over the world with great marketing plans, she is also our marketing coach. And she's also like a great coach for me on the side. She keeps me on the rails. So you're going to absolutely love this. So do me a favor, grab a pen and hit the share button. Settle back because you're going to learn a ton. And today we're going to be talking about a very important subject on how do we create a 2021 marketing plan that actually works. So she's going to be talking about some of the key components that you're not even thinking about. So settle in and enjoy this. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, I want to do two things. Number one, I want to welcome you to an incredible community of people that are always learning. And so you're going to see we're learning just like you, and we take a ton of notes here. So after the show, wherever you're consuming the podcast, I want you to visit back because we're going to take great notes, and everything Xana tells us to do, I'm going to have them listed in links. So you can just click on them. They'll take you right to her website, right to whatever we're talking about. I'll make it super easy for you. Secondly, I want to encourage you to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it be from Apple, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, wherever. Hit the subscribe button because you can keep showing up with us. And every single week, you'll see we're going to be bringing a great key opinion leader that'll just challenge your thinking so that you guys can have a better practice and a better life. So thank you guys for showing up. So I want to introduce my guest. Now, some of you have seen her before. Some of you know her. She's been a great friend of the ACT community. And I'll start with this. I've been doing this for a long time. There are people that come and go in marketing. Like I see them at a trade show and it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Then you come back to the same booth next year and they're gone. I met you, Xana, probably, 10, 11, 12, 15 years ago. I lose track of time.
At least 15 years ago.
At least 15 years ago. And she has stood the test of time. She's rock solid. She's our chief marketing consultant. She runs her own company. She also works with a lot of the practices we coach. And her company is called Golden Proportions. If you've struggled finding somebody who's a great voice, somebody to help you, don't struggle anymore. When you're done spending all the money and wasting it, come and work with her because she'll keep you on the rails, and she does that for us. Now, Xana, I always love for people to know who we're talking to before we get into it. So if somebody's never heard your name and they've been sleeping under a rock, who is Xana Winans?
Who is Xana Winans? That's a deep, deep question. I'm going to say the best way to just get to know me is Golden Proportions Marketing is a marketing agency specifically for dentists. And it was started because I'm married to a dentist. So I got to live and breathe his practice journey, learned so many things that 20 years ago, we were able to start our own place. And it's a completely full service company, meaning that whether it's developing the marketing plan or creating a website or doing your SEO and your pay-per-click, your reviews, whatever it is, we do it all under one roof, and it just makes it a lot easier for our clients. So in a nutshell, I think that's me.
Yeah, it is. Well, there's a lot more to it, and you guys will see as we get going here today. And today we're going to be talking about a marketing plan for 2021. I'll speak for myself, and maybe a lot of people watching this or listening. 2020 was messed up. It's still messed up. And as we're coming out of it, all of us are trying to find a better 2021. But can we talk about the why of this subject before we get into the how?
Why you need a marketing plan?
Yes. Wait, if you're a dentist, you got to have a marketing plan? What are you talking about?
It's crazy we have to actually ask that question. So the why that we have to have a marketing plan is frankly because things like 2020 exist. That if you do not have a plan, all you're doing is reacting. And that's what we spent the entire year doing, was just reacting to the shockwaves that kept hitting the industry and our patients and everything else. And when you're reacting like that, you don't have the time to slow down and actually think. You're simply just dealing with the crisis of the moment, and that makes it a completely unpredictable year. So the reason this is critical is just if you want to have a smooth 2021, if you don't want to have roller coaster months where it's great one month and complete garbage the next month, if you want to have something where you feel confident that you're going to grow and you're seeing the results, you need a plan. You can't do it seat of your pants. You just can't.
Right. Because I've been there and I've done it. It doesn't work and it frustrates everybody. And everything is anecdotal. So when you feel something, you're like, we got to do this, we got to do that. And so today we're going to be talking about how not to do that and come up with a plan that works. And tell us, like, so you talk to a lot of dentists. I do too. Do people have a marketing plan? Like, what percentage of dentists even have one?
My guess would be at best, maybe 10% of dentists have a marketing plan. And I'm talking about the dentists that you and I work with, which we know are kind of like the upper echelon, the people who love continuing education. The general dentists of the world, even below that, I bet very, very few of them have it. So if only 1 out of 10 people have a marketing plan, think what an incredible advantage you will have over all the competition in your market if you were that 1 out of 10, because the rest of them are running wild and crazy without a plan, and you're just going to be so much farther ahead of them.
Yeah. Now speak to so I'm going to go off the rails a little. Xana, I've been around a long time. I've done all these marketing plans with all these people. It never works out. Like, why should I even consider this? I mean, I'm sure you've heard that one before. Like, money spent on marketing is wasted. Now, I don't believe that's true, but what would you say to somebody saying that?
Well, I would say they were probably right in the past that they spent money in a way that completely was wasted. But there's a bunch of reasons as to why it gets wasted. It's because you don't have a plan, and because you're just like, oh no, I am missing patients for this week. There's holes in my schedule, and so you just call and immediately start trying to do something. That's an absolutely easy way to waste your money. But doctors waste money constantly by not converting the leads. The whole point of marketing is making the phone ring. Sales is converting those opportunities into appointments. And they tend to be forgetting about that part of it, that there is so much more. It's kind of following through the whole patient journey. There's a million reasons that marketing doesn't work for people. They don't spend enough, their budget's spread too thin. Nobody's actually measuring it, and it's just kind of like how I feel about my marketing. So yeah, without a true plan, you probably have wasted an incredible amount of money.
Oh, I've wasted more money than anybody on marketing. Now, wait, you said a magic word. It's called measuring. Because would you agree? Like, let's say this, no matter where you're at on the spectrum, I think it's really important to do some research. So if you're going to do a plan or not do a plan, I think you got to start with, okay, let's look at some data. I was just on a phone call with an office and they're dropping all of their insurances. And I'm like, okay, this is the beginning of the journey. This is not the end of the journey. And you need great data, but like, we should probably start with some research, don't you think?
Oh, I totally think you should. The most important thing for me is the baseline, to be able to say, here's where we are. And then that baseline measurement will help you decide where you need to go. So just like you help doctors measure their production per hour and their reappointment rate and any of those kind of metrics that are critical for practice running really well, you need to be doing the exact same thing with the marketing that you did in all of 2020, and frankly 2019 if you have the data. Where did you do it? How much did you spend? How many leads did you generate? And a lead is a phone call, a form submission, online scheduled appointment, which is very different than how many people actually scheduled. And if you know that kind of data, and ideally even the return on investment that you got from a particular piece of marketing, that's the research you have to know up front to look at your plan for next year objectively. Otherwise, it's just sort of a gut check of what you think needs to happen. And I tell you what, when they say data doesn't lie, it doesn't. It just makes it painfully obvious what you need to do.
Right. Now, you've helped me along all the years in this. You need to know like acquisition costs, what a new like, let's put this into play really easily for a dentist watching this. Like, now, and correct me if I'm wrong, like you have to know how much a new patient is worth to your practice. Like everybody should know that there's a new patient value and then an acquisition cost. And for years you've trained me like you got to have a ratio, like either 3-to-1, like whatever you're investing, there's got to be a tangible ROI. And then you can say, oh, now I can double down on that. That's working. Am I on the right track or off the right track? Like, what are some of the simple metrics if I've never measured anything before?
Okay, so there's two things that you mentioned: the cost per lead. Well, you mentioned cost per acquisition. So acquisition is a new patient that you actually had come into the practice, and that's really just, let's say it was your SEO on your website, and you got 300 new patients this year, and you take the cost of what you spend on the marketing divided by those 300 patients, you have your cost per new patient. Actually, I think I just said that backwards. It should also be measuring cost per lead, which is how many times did you make the phone ring with the cost of that actual marketing strategy. Because if you find, for example, that you are spending far more in your cost per lead because there's just a ton of people that are making the phone ring, but very, very few of them are converting, maybe they're not high quality leads. So those are two really important metrics. But then ROI is everything. The only way to know your ROI, though, is to have found some way to track your new patients and where they came from.
Right.
So teams have got to be religious about putting in the actual last known source of how that patient found your practice so that you can pull a report and see what you did this past year.
Right.
I will tell you, this is fascinating to me. So you know how we have Smart Market Dental, which connects to the practice management software so we can automatically track ROI. One of the first things I do is I go and I look at the referral sources, and the first referral source table that I create is called the none table, which means how many patients, new patients came in this year that nobody knows where they came from. No referral source listed. I will tell you it's typically anywhere from 60 to 80% of all the new patients that you saw.
See, that's crazy. Now go back, because you taught me this. Like, you got to find out where they came from.
Right.
And you know, this goes part with training. So we're going to talk about how to set goals, but like, here's, you guys, if you're listening, here's what Xana is really trying to say. This is actually more of a science than you would think it is. A lot of you just think it's all kind of like, hey, we're going to throw some money. But if you can diagnose where the challenges are, let's say you get a lot of leads, but no conversions, you know where to work. You also can find out when you ask the right questions and you're trained as a team member, which you taught me how to do that. You can find out where the leads came from. And they often, okay, here's an example, because I'm kind of leading you with the question. People don't often tell you where it came from when you go, how did you find out about us, right? You got to do a little bit more homework than that if you're answering the phone in the dental office.
Yeah, you absolutely have to dig, because most people will just say that they heard about you from a friend or they were on your website, but what drove them to your website in the first place? Was it because they did a search and you ranked really high and thus it's your SEO? Was it because they read great reviews? Was it because they got a postcard in the mail and it just literally told them to go there? Or was it legitimately a referral from a friend? And so in marketing, that's called the halo effect. So there's a lot of factors that influence someone finally making that decision to pick up the phone and call your office. But if you don't ask those questions, you're just sort of going with whatever comes out of their mouth. And it's pretty much universally going to be a friend told me to come or I was on your website. And that's not really representative of how well the marketing is working.
Right. Now you can do what you want if you're a dentist watching this, but listen, I'll be on your side for a second. But Tanya, I'm prepping teeth all day. Like, I don't know what's going on up there. I've got great people going on. You have a product called Smart Market Dental, and you've recorded, like the last time I asked you, it was well over 1 million phone calls. I don't know how many now. And you even shared some of them with me. And I'm like, oh Lord, like you can see conversion rates, you can see all those things, not to be big brother, but like to really know what's going on and coach team members. That's part of the data that you're talking about, right?
Well, it has to be, because otherwise, again, it's all anecdotal. And, you know, this is not to hit on any of the front office team members who might be listening, but if it were me who's working the front office and I'm getting a bunch of phone calls and I don't feel like I'm converting them really well, I'm not going to go tell my boss, yeah, I kind of suck at converting these leads that you're spending all this money to generate. So, doctor, you're going to hear a little bit of what they want you to hear. The only way to know for sure is to do call recording, to do call tracking lines. There's a unique line that's identified with each marketing campaign but it's not meant to shame your team. I mean, that's critical to me because they're going to be concerned about what you think of their performance. It's a training opportunity.
Right.
Because, doctor, you would probably handle those calls just as poorly as your team would, because I've heard them.
Yeah. Now, and you're exactly right. It's an opportunity to get better. I played football in college. We had to watch game film, and it was painful sometimes. I wanted to be a speaker, and I had a speech coach, and she's like, "You need to record lectures," and I'm like, "No." And she watched one with me, and she's like, "This is terrible." And I was like, "Well, thanks for the vote of confidence." But what she was able to do is say, "You can't listen. Look at that." Like, what I was able to learn was how to get better, and I think that's the way we got to position. We're all looking to get better here, and it's an awesome opportunity to learn what's working and what's not working on that side of things. So I do want to talk about goals. Like, so once I have the data or any baseline data, like, how do I even begin to set goals? Because am I looking for a number of new patients? Am I going to look at historical data? Like, where do I even start?
So I think the goals are individual to each practice. Usually there's a universal goal of how many new patients I want to see a month. And so maybe you had an average of 30 a month last year. You don't want to just randomly go in and say, "Oh, I want 60 new patients a month next year." That's not realistic. I mean, we've talked about SMART goals in the past, and a big part of a SMART goal is it has to be realistic. So maybe it's, I want to increase my new patient growth by 10 or 15%. Or a specific number. Another type of goal that's really common is there's a type of patient that I want to get for a particular procedure. I'm now Invisalign certified and I want more of those, or I do sedation dentistry and I want more of those types of patients. So being really specific about the type of patient or the quantity of patient, or maybe it's a goal of like improving the value of the new patient who comes in. But being really specific and measurable in that goal is the first place to start. So Don't get crazy and aggressive.
Yeah. And I love what you said. I want to just go back to that for a second, because you get to hear these conversations. Like, some dentists will say, "Well, I only get 10 new patients a month." And they're sitting next to a dentist at a conference who's like, "Yeah, I get 300 a month." And I'm like, "Well, that sounds terrible." You know what I mean? Is there any truth? Like, it might not be bad for them, but I can tell you 300 new patients a month, half of them probably aren't showing. Is it the right? So it's not the good or bad. Don't get fooled that more is better. What you said is exactly right. It's got to be the right type of patient instead of the wrong type of patient. Because if you're getting 300, they're not really coming because of you. Sometimes they're coming because you were cheap, there was an offer, you were on their plan, something like that. So I think it's very important for a dentist to come up with realistic goals for a number of new patients. And some of you have been doing this for a long time. You know what that number is. Now, wait, I have so many questions because I get these and I don't know the answer. So a dentist called me this week, said, "How much of my production should come from new patients?" And I honestly don't know the answer. I would almost say it depends. But how do you answer that question?
That's the first time I've been asked that question, so I don't actually have the answer, but now I'm going to go look it up.
Okay.
But wow, that's a great question. I mean, well, if we think about it, if an average new patient is worth anywhere from $800 to $1,200 their first year, which is, we see a wide range, but let's say it's $800 to $1,200. So let's do some math. And let's say a typical practice with one doctor seeing patients 15 days a month, 16 days a month. And from what I know, the types of practices you and I work with, they want no more than 1 or 2 new patients a day because they give them a lot of attention in that new patient experience so that person really feels like they want to commit to this practice. All right, so now we're looking at 15 patient days a month times $800, or times your 2 patients a day times maybe $800 in annual value for that patient for their first year. And so if you see that number, then you can quickly figure out roughly what percentage of overall production it is. But that's not where the money comes. The money is not from the first year the patient is in the practice. Right. You can't measure ROI in the first couple of months that you're doing something. The money is with the patient staying in the practice. And I think the statistic is the average patient stays in a practice at least 10 years. So now all of a sudden that $800 is worth $8,000. And that's the way you got to see what their real value is.
Yeah, I have a dentist on Long Island who said this years ago. He goes, when you said that, it made so much sense because my wife didn't even like me for the first 6 months when I met her. Do you know what I mean? Like it took a little while for this to work. There was a trust component. You got to remember there's a significant percentage of your patient base that's been relocated. They're finding you for the first time. They might know, all they know is getting their teeth cleaned and they don't know that they're aware of these things. So it isn't just first time, do all this dentistry type of thing. I think it's really smart to have a really good long-term vision in this. But when I'm looking at 2021, okay, so let's say I take a look at some historical data. I'm trying to figure that out. Am I going to track everything? Because that's a lot of data. Like, where do I decide which KPIs to track? Now, if you're not familiar with the KPI, what's a KPI?
Key performance indicator. It's a number that says, am I hitting my goal or not?
Okay. So typically when you're working with a practice, how many KPIs are you tracking? Like, let's take some practice you talked to today and you're looking at 2021. Are you looking at 30 things, 10 things, or 5 things?
So while we might look at a large number of things in the beginning before we create a plan, because that's what tells us where the opportunities lie, once we've got the plan and the goals, I'm a big believer in what we call the critical few. That you do not want to track everything. You can't accomplish every goal and create the perfect new patient experience and everyone's going to stay in your practice for 10 years right out of the gate the first year. What you do is you pick probably, I say, a max of like 3 or 4 KPIs that are a measurement of, am I accomplishing these really big goals? So the way I look at it as, if you're tracking a KPI and you're just hitting those numbers without even trying, like whatever it is, whether it's your production or new patients or lead opportunities, and you don't even have to think about it, don't pay attention to that part of your marketing. Just let it keep doing what it's doing. Take the couple of critical few changes that you can make to your marketing, look at the KPIs that are attached to them, the ones that give you like the greatest value, the greatest payoff over time. Those are the ones you want to put all of your focus and energy into. And I promise once you fix those, then you can go fix the next batch. But max, like 3 or 4 KPIs, I think, are about what you would want to track, or you get lost in the weeds of the details.
Right. So let's say my name is Dr. Charlie Brown. Okay. And so I'm like one of your, what's a typical, now I guess every practice is different, but what's one that shows up quite often when you're looking at a measurable that you're like, I know if most practices could fix this, it makes a huge difference in a practice. What's one that you talk about frequently?
It's retention.
Tell me, wait, what does that mean though?
Well, retention is, the whole point of the marketing is to make the phone ring and then get that patient into the practice. But if you don't keep them, it's a complete and utter waste of money that you have done in your marketing. And I see practices that just churn all the time. They really don't grow their number of active patients. So retention is, I want to get, maybe it's 300 new patients this year, but I want to only have maybe like 100 patients that move, die, decide to pick another dentist, because otherwise you're not growing your practice and growing your revenue. It's just a churn.
Right.
So retention is everything.
Go back to that. So would you measure retention in just active patients? And would you consider those? Everybody has a different window. I think it's 18 months.
Yeah, we measure 18 months. So
Okay.
active patients is like one of the biggest things that we look at, because it just tells you, is the problem the marketing, or is the problem how you're getting people rescheduled, or the experience that they're having in the practice?
Right.
Often
Now,
it's more internal.
yeah. So you guys can see, like, she's really smart. And I totally geek out on this, so I apologize for the questions. But I want to know your thoughts on this. Like what you just shared, it's got to be the net number. It's not just adding. And you hear people say this, like there's a certain percentage of your patient base that will die, move away, get displaced. When you look at attrition, like if I'm a dentist, what can I expect? What's a range of attrition percentage wise on patients? Is there,
So
or is
obviously
that,
it depends on the practice. Like if you have a more geriatric practice, you can reasonably expect more of them to die. But national statistic is 8% of people move every single year. So it is realistic to expect to lose 8% of your practice, of your active patients, just because they moved for a different job or they didn't like the community they were in anymore. So that's just a guarantee. You have to replace those people. And
Right.
then you add in the ones who die and a few who might not have felt like this was their perfect dental home. You're probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% is my guess. I don't have the exact number. And again, now I'm
Okay.
going to go look it up.
Hey, that's okay. Now, you guys are listening. Xana is one of my dear friends in dentistry. So she doesn't, we talk about what we're going to talk about, but then I also throw her some like hardball questions here that she, now I wanted to, I want to dispel this rumor because I get this one too. I heard somebody say this to me a long time ago that a dentist should expect that a majority of their patient base is within 5 years of their age. Like, is there any truth to that?
Yes, I've preached that for years. I
Like what
mean,
percentage? Like 80%?
I would say the majority of a practice, yeah, about 80% that the patients, well, it's not so much are they that or should you be trying to attract that? So if you're a 25-year-old dentist, you are not going to get a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s who are going to trust you because they've got life experience who says, you don't know enough yet. You're a young kid. But by the same token, you know, a 60-year-old dentist is probably not going to attract a whole lot of really young families. There's just nothing in common. They aren't connecting out in the community. So, yeah, most of your patients are and should be 5 years older or younger than the doctor. Maybe like 8 to 10 at most.
Yeah, interesting. It's always good to know so that you can set realistic expectations. And let's go back to that. So you were talking about the critical few. So let's say I come up with the critical few, and then are these pretty easy to track? Like, where do you measure, document them? You work with a lot of offices. Where do you start if I'm not using Smart Market Dental or something like that?
Honestly, it's just a spreadsheet. It's nothing sexier than Microsoft Excel that says, here's basically, I just do like a list that says, here's what my number was last year so that I have a baseline for comparison. Here's my goal for the year. And then month by month, I document the number, and you got to do it every month. You don't need to update it every week, but once a month, you need to go in and update that number and say, maybe if it's number of new patients or production or whatever that number is, and look at it as a team. This should not just be, okay, I looked at these numbers and, oh, well, what am I going to do with it? The whole team needs to be involved in, hey, guys, we are 50% below goal on new patients this month. What do we need to do as a team to make sure we bring that number up? It
Right.
should not just be on one person's shoulders.
Right. One thing you are adamant about is SMART goals. Now, I always think people know what SMART goals are, but some people are like, what is that? I heard that last week. What's a SMART goal? Like, there's a specific methodology behind a SMART goal. Can you share what that is?
So SMART goals are specific, measurable, um, is it
Attainable.
achievable? Oh my God, I'm blanking all of a sudden.
I know it's the end of the day. I'm kind of putting you, I'll help you because you taught me all this.
I want
Okay.
to say realistic and time-based, because if you don't have a deadline on it, but achievable and realistic are the same thing. So there's one other in there.
We'll
Unless
come
I
back.
got it the wrong way.
Yeah, she didn't know I was going to answer that, but you're right. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and
And time-based.
time-based. Yeah, it's got to be time-based because there's got to be a time to do that. Now, I'm going to roll into the next question that's obviously the odd. Okay, so let's say I come up with a critical few. I got a couple. Retention is going to be one of my goals this year. How much money should I allocate to, and you hear from experts, it's all over the board of how much you should spend on marketing. What's your thought?
So I generally base it on what the goals of the practice are and like how aggressive they want to be. If it is a practice where the doctor's in their 50s and they're well established and they just want to make some tweaks and adjustments, you're probably looking in the neighborhood of like 3 to 4% of your gross collections, not production, because production doesn't mean anything if the dollars don't come in the door. If it's maybe a younger practice that really wants to grow, or possibly like a practice that's 5 years from retirement and they want to get those numbers up so it makes them look a lot better for sale, you could be looking at easily 5 to 7% of your collections or more. And then there's some practices who are just on cruise control. They've been doing marketing long enough that they just know how to do it. And they've got a great patient experience and they've figured out their retention. It can be like 2 to 3%. So it doesn't have to be insane. Just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how fast you want to get there.
But wait, 5 to 7%, that's a lot of money. I can do my own graphic design. Like, no, I'm saying that jokingly because I've tried it. It is miserable. Like, I'm just, forget it. You don't even need to answer that question, Xana, but you see it all the time. People go, look at my website. I designed it myself. And I'm like, I can tell, like there are some things we should all not do. And I think that's a part of self-awareness in this whole process. I now know I should never, ever, ever do graphic design, ever. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. We all have our gifts, and I know where mine lie. I mean, there's definitely things that doctors and teams can do for themselves, and there's some things they should do for themselves. Like, I'm a big believer, social media needs to be done internally by the practice. When you just outsource it to somebody who's giving you a canned tool, I guarantee you're going to see your patients do not engage. They want to see the authentic experience of what's happening in the practice. So that's great for teams. Teams doing things like listening to their phone calls and grading themselves so they can get better at conversion, or making sure that they are asking for reviews and responding to reviews. Those are all great internal things. But I would not recommend you build your own website. I would not recommend you do your own SEO. I know a lot about SEO, and even so, I still shouldn't be the one who's doing it for myself. I hire experts.
Right.
So anything that's like lead generation, that's about making the phone ring, that I would say is probably a good thing to outsource. The internal stuff can be done by your team, like internal marketing.
Right. Now, if you're listening, you already know I'm a big fan of Xana, but if you're listening very carefully what she's saying, she's building a better practice all the time. We're talking about retention, verbal skills. She's not starting with, let's go with Facebook ads and let's do some billboards right away, because that often isn't a best investment for an office. So you want to make sure that these things work in tandem. Like, what we're going to be doing and investing is, it's going to make us better in the long term, which is more about the people, the processes, all that stuff. But I do want to ask this. Okay, so let's say I'm totally tracking you. I like what you're saying. We're going to do a critical few. I'm going to decide to do my budget. What if I allocate a certain budget? Let's say I'm a $1.5 million practice. I'm going to put some good money into this. Like, how long am I going to just go for it? Like, for the whole year? How long do I let this ride before I start to pull back on it? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
So there's two ways that you have to look at your marketing budget. There's two components of it. One is creating the assets. That's like the one-time fee of building a website, building a landing page for a pay-per-click campaign, designing your logo. Those are, I don't want to say one and done, because you want a new website every couple of years, but they're not going to be a recurring cost. Your recurring costs that are going to happen over time are the things like the SEO or the pay-per-click management or the review service that you pay for. So once you've got those assets created and you start the actual lead generation process, you got to give it a good 6 months. As much as I'm like a big nerd for all the data that comes out of marketing, there is still some art to it. And you use the data to say, did the art accomplish what we wanted? And so you got to leave some time in there to pivot and say, okay, maybe this was not the right message that resonated with our target patients. So let's change the message. So typically a good 6 months to a year on a strategy, give it time to get some legs, and then you can decide if you need to change it, as long as you're measuring it.
Right. Yeah. And you've taught us you got to have a good mix of services. Just like investing, we've got to diversify the portfolio. I'm not going to put my whole future in Apple stock, right? You've got to have a good balance in your portfolio of things that you're going to do. So when you talk about SEO, pay-per-click, the review, you're pretty much spreading it out to a desired result, right?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, it's, you and I have talked about this, it's the marketing funnel. So like the top of the funnel is the brand awareness. That's things like, community events, and do you have great signage outside that's well lit at night? And, what am I doing so that people are aware of my brand? Social media is a big brand awareness tool. And then people get a little bit closer down the funnel to kind of considering you. And that's doing things like reading your reviews and going on your website. And then they'll finally get down to the decision-making process. And that's what really happens with your SEO, your pay-per-click, particular offers that you might have out there, direct mail. Those are the I'm ready to make a decision strategies. So you need a full mix. You can't just go right for the bottom of the funnel and say, I'm going to solve all my problems with SEO. You might rank at the top of the page with SEO, but if nobody's ever heard of your practice name, they don't have an idea of your reputation and what you stand for, they're going to be really easy to distract with a practice that they go, oh, I know who those people are. So you have to look at it's a mix. It is not a one strategy kind of plan. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. And people often aren't motivated by one impression. Like it's, everybody has a stat on this, like how many times an impression has to come across before you actually make a decision. Can you speak to that? And then also, I think consumers are much smarter now than ever. Like we've been duped and fooled so many times. Like when I get a text and it's a link saying, we're UPS and we're trying to find you and we have a package for you. I'm like, yeah, whatever, type of thing. How many impressions does an average person need to see? Is there any data behind that? It's a lot, I would imagine, right?
It is a lot. The traditional rule has been that someone has to see your message or your brand a minimum of 8 to 9 times before their brain even recognizes that they're seeing it. It's almost like the first 8 or 9 didn't count because it took that long for them to open their eyes and go, oh, let me look at this marketing for this particular practice. Then after that, you're probably looking at another couple of impressions. And it just depends on the stage that they're at. Are they doing research and saying, hey, what are my options for replacing a missing tooth? You still need more impressions because they're not ready to make a decision. They're doing homework. But if it's something simple like I moved into the neighborhood and I need to find a new dentist, then you don't need as many additional impressions. They just know they have to make a decision. So it's about kind of saturation and consistency. That's why you can't just go in with these like one shot, putting out fire type of marketing strategies. It's a terrible idea because you're not giving them those 8, 9, 10 impressions.
Right. Now go back to it. You said a magic word. It's called consistency. Consumers are smart now. Like, and you've seen this, like I'll see a gorgeous website or like an awesome Facebook post from a dentist. And then you call the office and they go, doctor's office. And I'm like, whoa. Patients can pick up on, you can do gorgeous out here. But if it's a poor experience, the synapses don't work in their brain. They're like, whoa. That's like a key piece of what you're teaching, the brand consistency from front to back, right?
Yeah, it absolutely has to be. Everything from like, are the colors of your logo, do they feel like the office environment that you're walking into? People just get that something doesn't feel congruent here. There's a lot of subtle cues that we just pick up on as consumers that are going to influence our decision. So the consistency is seeing them over and over and over again, but it's also consistency in the message. If your positioning message is that you're like this incredibly warm, friendly local dentist, which is a very generic message, they better have that experience when they walk in the door, or they're going to say these people, like it was a bait and switch.
Right. And you can't let your ego get in the way because, again, I'm going to go back to what we were talking before. Once you have the data and the research, now you can start to. So this morning in our call, Xana was like, okay, we're going to install some heat maps. We're going to figure out where these people are going because I can be really opinionated about the colors and the layout. You can't deny when you see where people go on your site. Explain what a heat map is because I love that coaching you gave us this morning. You can actually track what people do, how long they stay, where they go on your site, right?
Yeah, it's very big brotherish, but it is incredibly useful. We all, I think, bring our personal perspective and biases into the marketing that we're having somebody create. We're like, but this is how I would engage with this marketing, so everybody must do it that way. Not true. Heat mapping is one of the best things out there. You can install heat mapping software on your website. We use one called Hotjar. There's a couple of other good ones out there. But the important thing is after it gets typically like a month's worth of information, you can see how people are using your website. So they typically look at like 3 different things with heat mapping software. They look at how far people are scrolling down the page. So if you have a bunch of really good information and all your calls to action are on the bottom half of the page, and by the bottom half of the page, you got about 25% of people left, you need to move that information up. They also do click maps so that you can see exactly where people are clicking. And this is fascinating because you might use like an icon in your design and think it looks really cool. And they think it's something they can click on. And you'll realize you're actually frustrating the user because they're clicking on something that isn't actually going to give them action and take them somewhere. So we need to see that behavior. And then the heat map is literally like, where does my mouse move? Where do they spend their time and attention? I think I mentioned to you this morning, it's almost like watching somebody read a book line by line with their finger. Their mouse moves where their brain is going on the website. That's showing you how their brain is thinking, and it tells you what they care about. So you get like a month's worth of that data, and I bet you're going to completely rip your website apart and change a lot of things so that people get the experience they want.
Yeah, that might not be something I want to take a look at, because I already know it's going to be frightening. Because so more on that later. We'll probably have a follow-up, and I'd love to do some heat maps on dental websites and say, look, here's one that's working, here's one that's not working. So okay, so now I'm totally in. Okay, so I've got my critical few, I got my budget in place. We're going to do consistency. Let's say 2020 was an okay year for me. I want to kill it in 2021. What are some of the biggest mistakes or biggest failures practices make as they get started on this? Where do they go wrong?
Well, one, they don't have a calendar mapped out. They don't have the literal step by step and who owns each step. So is it a team member who is responsible for doing your social media, or is it your agency, or are you, the doctor, responsible for it? How frequently are we going to post? It should literally be mapped out month by month or week by week with assigned tasks so that you're focusing on the thing. So literal plan, that's one of the first things people fail on. Like I mentioned, like 1 in 10 people actually have a plan at best, because that plan holds you accountable to, am I doing what I said I was going to do? Because when you go off the rails and then things don't work, it's because you're just reacting and you're not following a plan. The other thing I typically see is they'll spread their budget really thin. So like they go to a trade show and they hear how important reviews are, and then they see software that talks to them about appointment reminders, and then they want to build a new website and do their SEO, and they also want to do pay-per-click, but they heard about this social media advertising that they can't pass up. And so it's just like little drops in the bucket all the way across, and there's nothing that can have an impact.
So you're half in on like 5 things, not all in on 5 things type of thing.
Right. I mean, it's basically just another way of talking about the critical few. Pick your critical few marketing strategies and hit them hard and do them well. Unless you got a giant budget and you can do everything really well, pick a couple of things and do them well. Don't spread yourself thin.
Yeah, I would say also don't get distracted by squirrels. So, because I've told this story many times. One day I got a box at my office, and like I am Mr. Idea. It's like, oh, that's a cool idea. That's a cool idea. You get started on a plan, and then a bright, shiny object comes by. So I get a box one day in my office. I open it up. It's a bunch of these little squirrels, like these little, squirrels. And there was a rubber mallet. And so Xana was like, squash the squirrels, like just stay focused. And so I'll encourage you guys. I pivot more than anybody in the planet, but part of a plan and the success of a plan is you got to see it through, and you got to be able to put energy into it and not pivot, right?
Well, no, you do need to be able to pivot, especially in a year like 2020, but you need to pivot thoughtfully and not get distracted by the squirrels or the shiny object marketing. Don't just like somebody says this worked for them, oh, I need to try it. That is a sure way to waste money. Everybody's practice is different. Their goals are not your goals. So get some stuffed squirrels and a hammer and just like beat them during your team meetings when someone starts to go off track.
Yeah. Now, how closely do I stick to the plan? I mean, you're not talking about being super dogmatic in every step. I mean, if you stay pretty close to a plan, how close? Like 80% of the plan, 90% of the plan?
Like the 100% of the plan.
Okay, scratch that. Follow your plan.
Follow your plan, but measure your plan. So if you are measuring those KPIs, the KPIs will tell you maybe this plan was a little bit off track in this spot, and that's where we need to pivot. But if you're doing the plan and the KPIs are telling you you are hitting every single goal every single month, don't get distracted. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working. So it's subjective. When you get situations like 2020, everybody has to pivot. That's just inevitable. Nobody could have predicted this. But hopefully, I'm thinking next year is a lot closer to normal-ish, maybe by the middle of the year, and stay on plan.
Yeah. And this is one of my favorite things as we come to wrap this up. Like, you've already painted this. Sometimes people get involved in dentistry and they think marketing is an outside impression, like it's a billboard, it's a website, like marketing is everything. I mean, it's how you answer the phone, it's how you retain patients. Like, I think it's really important that every dentist knows there's got to be a continuous marketing plan. And you see that probably all the time, right?
Yeah, for us, it's critical. Our doctors get a brand new plan every single year. My team is swamped in like October, November, December because they're laying out the plan for the next year. Because when someone follows the plan, they see that it works and they just want to keep doing the plan. But if they've conquered their critical few, then the next year they can add one more interesting idea or another interesting idea to keep meeting those goals that you've got for the practice. So, yeah, it's setting a plan for the year. This is the time to do it. I mean, we are just on the verge of a brand new year. If you are not getting your plan together, you're going to be halfway through the year and going, what happened?
I love it.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah. Any last thoughts you have before we wrap up? Give us a piece of advice if I'm a young dentist watching this.
So piece of advice, track everything. So record your calls, like put a tracking phone number on every piece of marketing you're doing, because that is going to be the most eye-opening thing you're going to say. That, and create a plan. Like, just give us a call. I love to talk to people. My team loves to talk to people and just hear what they've been doing, what's working, what's not working. And when you've worked with thousands of practices, we can give you a lot of objective, well, no wonder this didn't work. Here's a better way to do it. So I love helping people like that. I would take those calls all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're listening to this and you're kind of struggling what to do, I'm going to tell you, don't even hesitate. Reach out to Xana and her team. They are amazing. She'll even take a look at your website and grade it for you and tell you how bad it is or how good it is. She did that for me and it freaked me out. But for the benefit of people that are listening, maybe on iTunes or anything, Xana, how do I find you? Where do I learn more about who you are, what your company does?
Easiest place to go is our website, which is goldenproportions.com. You can see the services, you can see a portfolio so that you can check out the work that we do, make sure it fits your style. And then we have live chat on there that's monitored pretty much all the time. That's the easiest place for most people to start. They just ask a quick question, or they can go schedule an appointment so that they can talk directly with one of our team members and find out a little bit more.
Awesome. You guys are the real deal. Xana, as always, I appreciate our friendship. Your mentoring, what you do for our clients, it's awesome. So thank you so much. And we're going to have Xana back again and again and again with new topics, new things to cover in 2021 to make sure you guys have the greatest year ever. So stick around, Xana, while we say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for watching the Best Practices Show. If you enjoyed today, which I know you did, do us a favor, hit the share button, share it with your friends. Keep sending us suggestions for things that you would like to see on the Best Practices Show, whether it be from Xana or other guests. We'll keep lining that up because we have a fabulous 2021 lined up. Check out Act Dental U, our workshops there. Keep showing up, subscribe, and together we will make this the greatest year ever. So until we see you next time, keep watching the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening.